Good morning. I hope you're doing great this morning. Welcome to our week 3 of It's Personal, our new series we've been doing for the last few weeks. The bottom line for this week is it's personal because Jesus understands your story. And our goal is for all of us to recognize that Jesus does understand our stories and to help us develop empathy so that we can better understand other stories and see where they're coming from. Very similar to how Jesus treated Zacchaeus and understood his whole story and didn't just take the popular opinion of what Zacchaeus and who he was. This morning, if you want to go ahead and get your Bibles, we'll be looking at Philippians chapter 2, as well as we'll be in Luke chapter 19 with that story of Zacchaeus. I hope you enjoy this lesson, and I'll see you in just a minute, and we'll talk about it a little more.
We had just returned from a retreat. It had been a long bus ride home. Not long because it took us 10 hours, but long because 3 students threw up on the bus. 3! Listen, as I tell you this story, I am already, just give me a moment, gagging from the memory of the smell that no amount of air freshener could ever cover. By the time we got back to the church parking lot, everyone was ready to go home, even me. I was so excited to get home, shower, to take a nap just for 1 second. But I noticed Megan still hanging around the front door of the church. Megan was a junior and had been a longtime member of our youth group. She was super active in the church, even though her parents didn't really come often. I was surprised she didn't have her car at church, and even more surprised she had not bummed a ride home with one of her many friends. So I decided to wait with her. I offered to drive Megan home, but she insisted on waiting for her mom. After an hour of us just talking and waiting, I told Megan, "Come on, I'll give you a ride home." I could tell she was anxious about me driving her home, though I wasn't sure why. I felt like I knew her pretty well, and in my mind, wasn't sure about why she was so anxious about me taking her home. When we pulled up to Megan's house, the first thing I noticed was a wheelchair ramp. I didn't remember anyone in her family that used a wheelchair, so I asked her about it. And listen, I just was bold in my asking, and immediately she got really quiet. And I regretted asking about it because of how uncomfortable it made her feel. Megan then began to tell me that her dad had a stroke last year and could no longer walk, and I felt super terrible. She told me about how her mom had become his caregiver and how hard life was since her dad couldn't work anymore. And I felt terrible because Megan shared how embarrassed she was that her dad now needed care. And she no longer had friends over to her house because she didn't want anyone to see him like that. I hadn't known any of this before, and I saw Megan on a weekly basis. I sat and I just listened. I had no idea what Megan had been holding on to, what she was going through, and honestly, after that conversation, I realized I barely knew her story. I had no idea what had been happening with her family. I thought I knew Megan, but until I pulled into her driveway to drop her off, until I asked that one question, until I sat and listened, and I really had no idea what she was actually experiencing in her life. I thought I knew her, but I just saw a glimpse of her story. We often assume we know the stories of other people, don't we? We assume we know them just because we know their name, or what they are good at, or what they are into. Many of us confuse following someone on Instagram with actually knowing their story. Their Instagram story is not their personal story. I made that mistake with Megan. I thought I knew her because she came to church every week, but to be honest, I really had no idea about Megan's story. I thought I knew Megan because of the way she acted and the friends she had, but there was so much more to her that I just didn't know about. If we're all being honest, we are all guilty of assuming we know where our friends live. But until we step into their homes, there are pieces of them we may never be aware of. There is so much more to a person than what we see on the outside. Everyone has a backstory we may never know about. We also have a backstory. Each one of us have a story that comes with family dynamics, friends, things that has happened to us, hurts and wounds that we carry, all the good and all the bad things intertwined into the story of our lives. Most of us know our own stories pretty well. And those moments where we might break down and just cry or lash out at a friend in anger, we look for people to understand our stories better in hopes that they can understand us. We say things like, if they only knew the kind of morning that I had. You know, they don't know what I am dealing with at home with my siblings or my parents. I couldn't even sleep at night because I was so worried. I am angry all the time and I'm not even sure why I'm so angry and mad. This might be true for us, but we forget to think about the steps in the moment when our friends lash out in anger or a family member is rude to us. Y'all all know what that means. Remember, immediately we get upset with them. But have you ever taken a moment to sit back and wonder why they might have snapped at you? We have all had those mornings where you oversleep, spill your coffee down the front of your shirt, that big old stain that just sits right here, and still end up missing the bus. When our day starts like that, we can begin to be victims of our emotions. Giving grace to our friends and our family in these moments is so important because the reality is this: we never know what they are facing. We rarely try to understand their backstory, and because of that, we miss out on being personal with them and knowing the story of who they are. Over and over in the New Testament, we see Jesus take the time to understand people he met. He took the time to have conversations and share meals with people no one else would even think about spending time with. Jesus looked for the opportunity to get personal with people. We have been talking about a man named Zacchaeus and how Jesus walked into his life. Zacchaeus was not exempt to how Jesus impacted the lives of the people that he interacted with. Let's check it out just for a moment. Think about what Jesus does to try to know Zacchaeus. When Jesus came by, he looked at Zacchaeus and called him by his name. Zacchaeus, he said, quick, come down. I must be a guest in your home today. Zacchaeus quickly climbed down and took Jesus to his house in great excitement and joy. Jesus invited himself over to Zacchaeus' house and took time to enter into Zacchaeus' everyday context. Jesus knew it was risky, but he also knew there was more to Zacchaeus than what everyone in the town thought they understood about this guy. And you can see exactly what everyone thought in this next verse. But the people were displeased. He has gone to be the guest of a notorious sinner, they grumbled. It clearly didn't go over well with some of the people in the town. They were all talking about it. Sometimes we gossip about those people we don't like either. The thing about Jesus is he didn't conform to the world's standards. He was looking to connect with Zacchaeus on a greater level. Jesus didn't care what the townspeople were saying. He wanted to step into the place Zacchaeus was most comfortable. That was his home. It was the place that Jesus knew he could get closer to Zacchaeus and learn more about the man Zacchaeus actually was. Where we live is more than our physical address. Understanding our circumstances and situation is the window into who we really are. There is a part of our story that not everyone gets invited to. But here's the thing: Jesus is God. He already knew Zacchaeus' backstory, but Jesus spending time in Zacchaeus' home makes it all more personal. He was able to connect with Zacchaeus in a way the crowd was not willing to accept. Jesus showed that he wanted to get to know Zacchaeus in a bigger way, to really understand him. And he did it by getting personal and showing up where Zacchaeus lived. When it comes to understanding our own stories and the stories of other people, we can take a look at the life of Jesus as he sought out ways to get personal with people and understand their stories. Take a look at this verse in Philippians. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a servant and was born a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on a cross. Jesus stepped into our world as a human. He walked the earth to step into our story, to experience our world and where we live. Jesus made God personal for us. When we read the story of Jesus, he sometimes forget that moments that allow Jesus to understand and connect with our own stories. Same exact moments from your story may not have happened to him, but we can't forget that as a human, Jesus, he was once a baby who cried all night, just like you and I. He had to deal with siblings. He was forgotten by his parents. He experienced loss as one of his best friends died. He questioned his purpose. He dealt with people ridiculing him and doubting him. You know, he knows. He knows the hurt you carry, the worry you have. He knows the doubt you have in him and the things that keep you up at night. He knows your hopes, your dreams, your prayers. But he doesn't simply know them. He wants to step into your home, the place that is personal to you. Maybe that's your room. And wants you to know that he doesn't just know your story, he understands it. Here's the truth. It's personal because Jesus understands your story. Since he can understand our story, we can take steps in our lives to connect with him, connect with ourselves, and connect with others. Let's get real for a second. It can be hard to let people into our lives and let people know where you live. It can be easy to hold on to our secrets because we don't want people to judge us. Listen, I get that. We think in our minds about the responses that other people will have about our stories to our lives. So we hold tight to them. Sometimes we can even feel that our stories are too big to handle ourselves. So how can we expect someone else to get it? The beautiful thing is when we can begin to boldly share our stories with other people, it gives them this sense of permission to share their story too.
All right, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that. I wanted to just hit a few things with you before we wrapped up and I sent you on your way. Just remember, it can be hard to let others into your life, to let others know your story. But by doing that and being bold with our own story and letting people know more about us, it gives other people the comfort and maybe the permission that they were looking for to share something in their lives and their story that they've been struggling with, that they've been dealing with, that maybe we had no clue. Just like the story she told about the student she had that she didn't know her dad had a stroke. And you think, how could you not know that? But do we really take time to get to know people's stories, or are we allowing people to share their stories with us? Do they know that we're somebody that cares, somebody who they can be personal with? And some things we can do to start with that is let someone into your story. Find somebody in your life that you can let into your story. Maybe you've already let your parents in. Maybe your parents know you better than anybody, which if they do, that's awesome. Keep it up, parents. But maybe it's one of our coaches you can lean on, or maybe it's another student. But let somebody in. And then once they really begin to understand your story, then they'll start to want to share their story with you. And then find people and let them know, hey, anytime you want to talk, I'm here. We can talk. Our lives can change when we allow people to see who we are. And we can change other people's lives when we allow them to show us who they are. So just like Jesus took time to go to Zacchaeus' house, to see him, to get to know him, to be personal with him, we need to do that same with other people. We need to imitate Jesus in everything that we do. So I'll leave you with this. What does it look like to have others understand your story and for you to understand their stories? Think about that this week. What's that really look like? And maybe start easy. If you want to get to know a story, talk to your parents. Figure out what it was like for them as a teenager. Figure out the things they went through. Or a cousin or somebody. Start simple. It doesn't have to be a stranger on the street. It can be anybody. But what does that look like for other people to understand you and for you to understand other people's stories? Hey, I got great news. If you're watching this on Sunday morning, the 17th, then I will see you at 5:30 in the youth wing because we're having life group in person with the youth group. So 5:30 in the youth wing, can't wait to see you there, which also means we are going to have our youth small groups with our coaches on Wednesday night up in the youth wing. So we'll be able to discuss this class a little more in depth with each other. So I can't wait to see you. Whitney can't wait to see you. Ella May keeps talking about you guys. I don't know. She really loves you. But we can't wait to see you guys. We love you. We mean it. And we'll see you then.